Sir, I just wanted a job. Please let me go. Those were the last words Priya Sharma managed to whisper before realizing that the most powerful man in her city wasn't there to help her. At 17, she believed that a full-time elected politician could change her life, and he did. He turned it into a nightmare that would ultimately cost her father's life. In India, power knows no limits when no one is watching. Priya paid a price for believing that authority meant protection. This is the story of how a girl searching for hope became the target of a political machine of destruction, and how her resistance shook a system that once seemed unbreakable. Priya Sharma was born in the year 2000 in Unnao, a district in Uttar Pradesh that's neither quite a city nor exactly a village. It falls somewhere in between, a place where the roads are cracked, the houses are small, and the fields stretch as far as the eye can see. For most families there, education was a luxury, and a government job was the impossible dream that could lift an entire household of poverty. She was the second of 4 children. Her father, Rajesh Sharma, worked as a day laborer, taking whatever jobs came along each day. Her mother, Sanita, ran the household and helped with the family's small-scale farming. They grew wheat and milled flour to sell. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the family going. By local standards, they weren't the poorest, but life was a constant struggle. Every month meant worrying about food, school, fees, rent, and medicine. Before we continue with Priya's story, we invite you to become a part of a community that refuses to forget the cases that shake the world. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the stories that must be told. And let us know in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? Because stories like Priya Sharma's show that injustice knows no borders and can happen anywhere in the world. To understand how Priya ended up in the situation she did, you need to understand the world she lived in. Unnao was one of those places forgotten by development. The roads were dirt paths that turned to mud during monsoon seasons. The houses were simple structures that cracked under the relentless sun of Uttar Pradesh. There was no reliable electricity. When night fell, families relied on kerosene lamps that filled their homes with some smoke through the night. The Sharma family lived in a small house shared with 2 other families. Priya's father Rajesh would leave every morning before dawn, searching for work on nearby farms. Some days he came home with the equivalent of $2 or $3. Other days he came back empty-handed, his face heavy with the weight of not knowing how he would feed his children that night. Sanita, her mother, woke up at 4 a.m. to fetch water from a community well nearly a kilometer away. In this world of absolute scarcity, every mouth to feed was a painful calculation. Priya and her 3 siblings fought daily over portions of rice and chapati that were never enough for everyone. The children went to bed hungry most nights. When there was food, a cruel hierarchy took over. First the father, who needed strength to work, then the boys, who would one day earn for the family, and the last the girls, who ate whatever was left. For families like Priya's, having daughters meant a double burden, mouths to feed that grew up and required dowries to marry. It was a perverse logic, but it was the only reality they knew. A government job, any government job, meant not just stability, but the difference between dignity and misery for generations. In Unnao, letting a public job was like winning the lottery. It meant a fixed month's salary, guaranteed retirement, respect in the community, and most importantly, a chance to pull the entire family out of extreme poverty. Priya knew that. She saw how the families with someone in a government job lived differently. Better homes, kids in school, food on the table every day. But getting that kind of job required 2 things that Sharma family didn't have: money for briberies and political connections. It was a vicious cycle. The poor stay poor because they couldn't afford to buy the very opportunities they would free them from poverty. And it was exactly that desperate need, that hunger for a better chance, that made Priya vulnerable to what was coming. It was through a neighbor that the opportunity appeared. Shashi Singh was known in the neighborhood as someone with connections, one of those people who always knew someone important. She approached the family with a tempting offer. There was a powerful man willing to help talented youth from the area, a respected politician, a 4-term member of the Legislative Assembly. Shashi spoke with authority about Kuldeep Singh Zakar, describing him as a leader who genuinely cared about his community, especially bright young people who just needed a chance. He's already helped dozens of girls and boys get government jobs, she assured. All it takes is a simple interview. The proposal came with convincing details. There will be a trip to Kanpur, where the politician maintained an office. The interview would be informal, just a conversation to get to know the candidate better. For a family watching their children fight over scraps of food, it sounded like a miracle. On her second visit, Shashi brought her children. Shubham and Nidhi Singh. Both young and well-dressed, they shared stories of others who had benefited from the politician. Young people who now had stable jobs, family lifted out of poverty. They spoke with enthusiasm about the leader's generosity. The Singhs knew exactly where the family's weak points were. They emphasized how short the trip would be, just 2 days, how all expenses would be covered. For desperate parents watching their children waste away in poverty, the decision seemed obvious. The young girl felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was excited about finally being able to help her family. Another part felt unease she couldn't explain. Why would such an important politician be interested in her? But those doubts were quickly silenced by her family's urgent situation. On the morning of the departure, the family gathered for a farewell that felt most like a blessing. During the trip, Shashi told stories about the politician, painting him as an almost paternal figure. With every passing mile, the trap closed tighter. When they arrived in Kanpur, something changed. "Remember to be respectful," Shashi said. "He's a very busy man. Don't ask unnecessary questions." When the car stopped, it was in a government office. It was a private residence. Kuldeep Singh's car opened the door. A stout man in his 50s, with the bearing of someone used to being in charge. He looked her up and down like merchandise. "This is her?" he asked with cold authority. The Singhs left too quickly. Before any questions could be asked, a teenage girl was alone with a stranger. Inside, there were no secretaries, no paperwork, no signs of a professional interview. He began asking inappropriate questions. When she tried to speak about the job, he laughed coldly. "You didn't understand why you were brought here." That's when she spoke the words of desperation. "Sir, I just wanted a job. Please let me go." But pleading meant nothing to someone who had built a career on ignoring other people's rights. What followed shattered every illusion. The violence was systematic, a brutal demonstration of power. Throughout the assault, he spoke. Politicians like him were untouchable. Girls like her, disposable. Who's going to believe a beggar over a 4-time elected MLA? When the Singhs returned, they found a completely different person. The cheerful girl was gone. In her place was a traumatized shadow. Vacant eyes, trembling hands. A week later, Shubham Singh appeared at the family's home. "You think you can pretend like nothing happened? You're part of this now." That night, she was taken to a different location where Shubham and his driver assaulted her repeatedly. She discovered she had become part of an organized network. She was sold to a man named Rajesh Yadav for 16,000 rupees, about $800. The price of a human life, calculated coldly as if she were cattle at a market. These weren't random acts of violence. It was a business. When she finally returned home weeks later, she was no longer the same person. When her mother tried to ask what happened, her daughter only looked at her with hollow eyes and said, "They sold me, Mama, like cattle." But there was one thing the predators hadn't expected. Even completely broken, she still carried a spark of resistance and refused to die. Rajesh made a decision that would change everything. "We're going to the police. I won't let these men destroy my daughter and walk away free." On June 22, 2017, she sat before a judicial magistrate and spoke under Section 164 of the Criminal Procedure Code. She named Shubham Singh, Aldesh Tiwari, Bradesh Yadav, and others involved in the network. Her statement was detailed, clear, and devastatingly brave. But when it came time to include Kuldeep Singh in our name, the police refused. "We don't have enough evidence against him." It was the first sign that the system wasn't prepared to confront real power. 2 months passed with no action against Kuldeep Singh Zagar. That's when she made the bravest decisions of her life. On August 17, 2017, she wrote an open letter to the Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, directly named Kuldeep Singh Zagar and detailing everything that had happened. The letter was leaked to the press and made public. For the first time, Kuldeep Singh Zagar's name officially appeared linked to the allegations. The young woman had done what the system had refused: break through the protective wall around the politician. Her statement was detailed, clear, and devastatingly brave. She told of the false job promised, the systematic violence, and being sold like merchandise. Each word was a stone thrown at a system that expected her eternal silence. Despite police resistance, a second FIR was registered under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. The men named were arrested, all except the most powerful one. Justice worked in layers. Small fish were jailed quickly, while the shark at the top got institutional protection. In the following weeks, the family's life changed drastically. Neighbors began avoiding them. Rajesh lost jobs. Employers said they didn't want trouble. Anonymous calls came at night with explicit threats. The message was clear: withdraw the complaint or suffer the consequences. But the more pressure they faced, the more determined they became. "If we back down now," Rajesh told his wife, "they'll do this to other girls. Our daughter can have suffered from nothing." 2 months passed since the first complaint, and nothing had happened to Kuldeep Singh Zikar. He remained free, giving interviews, attending political events, smiling for cameras as if he were a respectable citizen. For the Sharma family, each day of impunity was a knife in the wound. That's when she made the bravest decision of her life. On August 17, 2017, she wrote an open letter to the Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath. It wasn't an ordinary letter. It was a desperate cry for someone with nothing to lose. In the letter, she did what the police had refused to do. She directly named Kuldeep Singh Zikar. She recounted June 4th. She detailed the subsequent attacks. She explained how she had been sold like merchandise. She implored for protection, action, basic justice. The letter was leaked to the press and made public. For the first time, Kuldeep's name has officially appeared linked into the allegations. The young woman who had done what the system had refused: break through the protective wall around the politician. The reaction was immediate and two-sided. Human rights activists began paying attention to the case, but threats intensified drastically. Anonymous calls increased. Unidentified men began appearing near the family's home. She had crossed a line she shouldn't have crossed. Weeks passed with no official response. The chief minister did not reply. The police did not act. Kuldeep remained free and untouchable. The young woman began to understand a bitter reality. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. Retaliation came swiftly. Rajesh began losing jobs even faster. Neighbors stopped speaking to the family altogether. Suppliers refused to sell them groceries. It was as if the entire community had been instructed to isolate the Sharmas. By the end of 2017, they had done everything within legal channels. In return, they received official silence and social terrorism. They didn't know the worst was yet to come. On the night of April 3rd, 2018, Rajesh was returning from work when he was accosted by a group of men. In their midst was Atul Singh Zikar, Kuldeep's brother. The beating was brutal and methodical. Calculated power. Each blow carried the implied question: "Do you still think you can challenge our family?" Rajesh was beaten unconscious, his ribs broken, his face disfigured. When he woke up, he was handcuffed in a jail cell. The charge was illegal firearm possession, a planted accusation meant to turn the victim into a criminal. For the young woman, seeing her father kidnapped by the state itself was the final breaking point. On April 8, 2018, she traveled to Lucknow. She carried a bottle of kerosene and a lighter. At the chief minister's residence gate, she poured fuel over herself. "My father is being tortured because we fought for justice," she shouted. "If you won't listen to us alive, maybe you'll listen to us dead." The guards prevented her from lighting the match, but the image was captured. A 17-year-old girl, soaked in kerosene, ready to burn herself alive so her father's voice could be heard. But it was too late. The next date, April 9th, news broke that would turn the case into a national tragedy. Rajesh Sharma had died in police custody. The autopsy revealed multiple injuries, blunt force trauma, clear signs of prolonged beating. The man who had chosen to fight for his daughter, who had chosen justice over silence, was dead. Dead for believing the system would serve a poor family the same way it served the powerful. Dead for loving his daughter more than he feared the consequences. The photos were devastating. Rajesh's body told a story no official report could hide. These were not injuries sustained resisting arrest. They were marks of systematic torture. The country finally had to confront an uncomfortable truth. What had happened to the Sharma family was not an exception. It was the system at work. For the first time in months of horror, something changed. Public outrage exploded. It was no longer possible to ignore, deny, or cover up. A girl willing to set herself on fire and a father dead in custody had finally broke the wall of silence protecting the untouchable. The national media, which had ignored the case for months, suddenly couldn't speak of anything else. Newspapers splashed front-page headlines about death in custody. TV channels aired heated debates. Social media exploded with outrage. The hashtag Justice for Unnao Victim became a trending topic within hours. But it was the image of the young woman drenched in kerosene that truly shook the nation. A teenager so desperate for justice that she was willing to set herself on fire. The photo circulated globally, transforming a local case into a symbol of political impunity. On April 10th, a day after Rajesh's death, public pressure forced the first real action. Atul Singh Zikar, Kuldeep's brother, was arrested for homicide. He was a small fish, but it was movement. The family had waited 10 months to see any action against the Zinkars, and it would took just 24 hours of national outrage to break decades of impunity. Protests erupted in various cities. In Delhi, women marched carrying placards with the young woman's face. In Mumbai, students held vigils. The case had transcended Uttar Pradesh. It had become a national issue about power, corruption, and justice. Opposition politicians demanded investigations. Human rights activists pressed for federal action. Even allies of Kuldeep's party began to publicly distance themselves from the case. The name Unnao had become synonymous with national shame. The pressure became unbearable. Within days, the Uttar Pradesh government was forced to transfer the case to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, a federal investigative agency. It was implicit admission that the local system had completely failed. The CBI wasted no time. On April 13, 2018, just 4 days after Georgette's death, Kuldeep Singh Zakar was finally arrested. The man, who had considered himself untouchable for decades, was now in handcuffs, led away by federal agents. For the young woman who had lost her father, seeing the perpetrator finally arrested was bittersweet. Justice was being served, but it came too late to save who mattered most. Kuldeep walked toward prison as Rajesh was being buried. Shanshi Singh, the woman who had lured the young girl, was also arrested. The network that had seemed untouchable was being dismantled piece by piece. Federal investigators didn't have the same political ties as the local police. They could follow the evidence wherever it led. The case gained priority status nationwide. It was no longer about a single family in Unnao. It was about whether India would tolerate this level of political impunity. Each arrest sent a message. Political power was no longer an absolute shield against justice. But fame also brought new dangers. With national attention came interest from groups determined to silence the case permanently. The family received police protection, but the fear remained. They had forced the system to act, but wounding systems can be unpredictable and vengeful. The young woman, now fatherless, faced a complex reality. She had achieved what had seemed impossible, arresting a 4-time elected MLA. But victory tasted bitter when it cost her the life of the one who had supported her most in the fight. But wounded predators are the most dangerous. And when all legal methods failed, only one option remained: physically eliminate anyone who dared to challenge them. More than a year had passed since Kuldeep's arrest. The trial was progressing slowly, but it was moving forward. The young woman had become a national symbol of resistance. Kuldeep was behind bars, but his influence still reached far beyond prison walls. It was an apparently ordinary Sunday when she was traveling to Raebareli with her lawyer and 2 aunts. A routine trip related to the court proceedings. The car was on the road when a truck appeared at high speed. The impact was devastating. It was not a normal accident. The truck's license plate had been deliberately removed. The police escort that should have protected her was absent. Officers claimed no room in the car. A high-profile survivor on an isolated road, unprotected. It was the perfect scenario for an accident. The crash instantly killed the young woman's 2 aunts. She and her lawyer were left in critical condition, fighting for their lives in ICUs. To those who understand the language of power, the message was clear. Neither imprisonment nor national attention nor official protection were enough to save anyone who defied the system. But this time, the silencing attempt was too far. The whole nation had followed the family's struggle. Everyone knew the dangers she faced. When news of the accident spread, the reaction was immediate and furious. Investigators quickly uncovered inconsistencies. The truck driver had connections to the Kuldeep's associates. The timing was suspiciously convenient. The absence of the escort was inexplicable. It wasn't coincidence. It was an attempt assassination disguised as an accident. The assassination attempt was the breaking point. India's Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi took unprecedented action. On August 1st, 2019, just 3 days after the crash, the Supreme Court ordered a complete transfer of the case to Delhi, away from Uttar Pradesh political influence. It went further. The court ordered 24-hour protection for the survivor and her family. It ordered compensation of 2.5 million rupees. It ordered that the trial be completed within 45 days. The Supreme Court had taken personal control of the case, sending a clear message: assassination attempts would not be tolerated. It was unprecedented judicial intervention. The country's highest court was saying that some cases were too important to be left to the whims of a local politics. The young woman had nearly died finally had real protection. The 40-day deadline was not a suggestion. It was a direct order from the Supreme Court. The Delhi court worked with the urgency that the system rarely showed. No more mysterious delays, lost evidence, or intimidated witnesses. Kuldeep watched from his cell as decades of impunity evaporated. The man who thought himself above the law discovered that even powerful politicians have limits when the entire nation is watching. For the young woman still recovering from the injuries of the accident, each day in court was a victory. She had survived sexual violence, threats, her father's death, and an assassination attempt. Now finally she would have her day in court. While recovering in the hospital, she learned that others involved in the network were also being prosecuted, not only for the original crime, but for the assassination attempt. The system that had protected predators for decades was now actively working to punish them. It was ironic. The attempt to silence her permanently had ensured her voice was heard more clearly than ever. The accident meant to end her fight had instead catalyzed faster and more complete justice than she could have ever imagined. In this Hazari court in Delhi, Kuldeep rose to hear his sentence. The man, once considered untouchable, now stood before a judge unafraid of his political power. The young woman he had attacked sat in the gallery, visible scar but unbreakable spirit. Guilty, declared the judge. The word echoed through the courtroom, carrying the weight of a struggle that had cost everything. Guilty of rape, guilty of abuse of power. 4 days later, on December 20th, the sentence was delivered. Life imprisonment. Kuldeep Singh Zikar would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. The court also ordered payment of 2.5 million rupees in compensation. For the young woman sitting in court as the sentence was read, it was a bittersweet moment. She had won. Yes, she had won. Something had seemed impossible when it all began. But victory tastes bitter. Her father was dead. Her aunts were dead. Her family was shattered. The Unnao case changed legal precedents in India. It established that politicians are not above the law. It showed that victims can win, even against seemingly invincible systems. It inspired other women to speak out against abuses of powerful men. She broke a system that seemed unbreakable. She forced the country to confront uncomfortable truths. She transformed a personal tragedy into national change. She proved that a poor girl from Unnao can defeat a 4-time elected politician.